All right, brother. Yogi Aaron. How are you, man?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Thank you
Spot
for
on.
having me here, Alex.
No, awesome, man. I'm super interested in the whole yogi scene. You are the
Yes.
first specific yogi I've had on. So I
Oh,
want to
wow.
know.
Thank you so much. I feel very honored.
Yeah, man. I want to know. Talk to me. Talk to me about yoga. Talk to me about your whole journey to get here. And now you're in Costa Rica. So that's kind of a wild ride.
Yes. I started doing yoga around the age of 18, and it's kind of morphed into over the years as to what it's meant for me. When I first started doing yoga, like from probably many people, it was a very physical practice. It was a way for me to quote unquote stretch and try and gain more mobility. I always kind of saw that older people that were sort of young or young like, one of the common denominators was they had a lot of mobility in their body. And that really inspired me because at the age of 18, I was always concerned with, what am I going to be like when I get older? And I didn't want to become like my grandparents. I wanted to be as vital as possible. So that yoga path took me down that journey. And then in sort of my mid to late 20s, I went to take a class with a yoga teacher in Los Angeles by the name of Brian Kess, who had this very uncanny way of bringing yogic philosophy to the masses, but in very simple, real world terms, that, for him, like if you want to move through something in your life, if you're depressed, if you're dealing with something, the solution was very simple: be still, hold a posture, and just breathe and come back to the breath again and again and again. And in that in that moment, it kind of brought together all of these sort of philosophies that I had been studying up until that point in my life, all of this kind of new age stuff, all of these self-help gurus that I had sort of read it, that I had followed and studied. And it inspired my own journey to not only manifest and live my own life purpose, but to empower others to do that. And I don't know, like in that moment, all of these lights started clicking or turning on. And I saw that this is what I was meant to do, was to teach yoga. And it's a form of exercise in some ways, at least in our Western, sort of culture, it's turned into exercise. And that seemed to me like a way, as a platform, to start to reach people and to be able to have a conversation, or start the conversation. It's very hard to start a conversation with most people and say, hey, sit down, shut the F up. I don't know if I can swear on your
Of
show.
course you can.
And and just be still. You can't tell that to most people. That's not going to register. Most people are anxious people with busy minds, with lots of things going on upstairs, and so they need movement. They need to find a way to express that quote unquote kinetic energy. So yoga just became like this amazing tool for me to be able to start to have a conversation with people. And then in my couple years later, I decided to make the big move to New York City to deepen my own practice. I know a lot of people always laugh at that. Like, you went to New York to do yoga? Absolutely. And there was a lot of reasons why I went there, but one of them was because I knew like there was going to be a lot of teachers there. It was also a gateway to different yoga retreat centers that were, outside New York City. And that was when I met two of my teachers, Ellen Finger and Rod Stryker. And then Rod and both of them showed me the path of how to live a more tantric lifestyle, and how to start to bring some of those teachings into my life, but also as a platform to also deepen up my students' yoga practice. And that was the point when my practice shifted from being, I would say, very physical to becoming more spiritual, more philosophical, and more kind of like life embodied, if you will. And then that I started a men's yoga group in New York City. I was sort of one of the very first people that conceptualized this idea of men's yoga. And that was when I met my business partner. And many years later, I ended up opening up a yoga retreat center in Costa Rica, which is where I am now, leading yoga teacher trainings and working on my second book. So
Wow. That's incredible,
that's it
man.
in a nutshell. I'm trying to make it as brief as possible.
It's crazy, right? When you ask the twists and turns of someone's story, right? And you can say it in a couple of minutes and you're like, wow, that's awesome. It's taking you here, there, and everywhere. But then like during it, you're like, holy shit, this is tough. Like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I don't know what I'm doing. I have to shift again. You know, you went to LA, then you went to New York, now in
Yes.
Costa Rica. You're like, oh, I'm changing. This is like daunting, and it's so beautiful to hear people's stories.
Yeah.
Just as like a personal note, I love hearing people's stories.
Yeah, I think I find it fascinating, that what excites me in listening to people's journeys, and I can relate to this in my own story, is a lot of people always say to me, like, Aaron, you're so lucky, you live this amazing life. And I think that really luck has nothing to do with it. I really believe that doors open in all of our lives. And there's some people that just walk through the door. And, when I moved to New York, it was like a door opened up for me. And it wasn't like the universe per se was, or, I didn't have some benefactor saying, come to New York. It was just this idea that landed in my mind. And I believe it dropped in from the universe that said, hey, if you go to New York, you're gonna step more fully into your purpose.
Mm.
And I think, like, for so many of us, we just need to pay attention to those doors opening. And what excites me about listening to people's stories is like hearing them talk about their own doors that opened up, and then they just walked through it fearlessly. And then, now they're living more in their purpose and more in their passion and living the life that they're supposed to live. And that's just been sort of like a guiding force in my own life, is to just listen, pay attention. Sometimes what comes across is a little bit painful, but you kind of have to walk through it. And then on the other side is a lot more freedom, a lot more purpose, a lot more, I would say, effortless manifestation.
I would agree with that. I think an important point to add on to that is you don't always have to know what you're doing, right? Like, if you sense an opportunity and you're like, I think this is an opportunity for myself or what I want to do or any of that stuff, then just walk through that door and figure it out. Like, you went to New York, there's going to be a lot of people
Yeah.
around. There's going to be a lot of yoga teachers in there. There's got to be a lot of people that are going to want to work on the mindfulness, because New York is mental. So it's
Yes.
usually quite opposites, right? Opposites attract. It's like
Yes.
you probably had no idea what you were going to do when you were going to go to New York, but you threw yourself in at the deep end, and mine in the arena, right? We all like to read or hear that speech. So just put yourself in that environment and just figure it out, and some beautiful, crazy things are going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, I went to New York. I knew one person
Wow.
who was my roommate. And I had worked on a cruise ship like 6 months before that. And he was on the cruise ship with me. And so we had just stayed in touch. And I happened to send him a message and say, hey, I'm moving to New York. Do you know anybody I could live with? And he said, well, actually, you could live with me. I'm in need of a roommate. And it was just amazing. But I had nothing besides him, living with him, um, to really fall back on. I moved with, like, very little money in my pocket. It was like New York or bust, baby.
Hell yeah.
and and I remember, like, on the train going to New York and feeling that sort of anxiety and
Mm.
anxiousness bubbling. I come from a family, a very British family, by the way, of
Not the British people.
yes. And both of my grandparents were, World War II survivors, and so, I think that specifically with one of my grandmothers, I grew up in a very anxious family atmosphere, and where everything had to be, thought about, and you don't take steps unless you've thought about every single little step and had a fallback plan and had a, cushion. And so when I went to New York, it was like there was no cushion, there was no fallback plan. It was like just do it or, not. And I was on the train going to New York, and it was like I just closed my eyes, went inside for a moment, and just felt that limitless potential awaken, that I
Wow.
didn't know where it was going to go. And that was actually when I came up with one of my favorite affirmations or mantras, if you call it either one, and which is I'm opening myself up to the universe of limitless possibilities. And that anytime I kind of felt like afraid, because it's natural to feel fear, it's natural to feel like, oh my God, what am I doing? But in Tantra, they say like you become what your mind focuses on, you become that which your mind grabs onto. So be careful what you let your mind grab onto, because you become that
Mm.
which your mind is holding on to. So I just intuitively kept going back to that mantra, that affirmation, anytime I felt like anxious, anytime I felt fear. And within literally 2.5, 3 months, I was actually starting to create a very successful empire for myself.
Crazy.
But there was like a little touch and go in the beginning. I got a job almost when I got to New York, like a real 9 to 5 job. It was a part-time job. But then I was fired 5 days later. And I was like, the universe doesn't want me. My path is not meant to work for others, like, in this kind of capacity. My path is to go and forge a path to be a trailblazer in life.
Mhm.
And so I did. And that's how actually I started teaching men's yoga.
Wow. That's funny you
Yeah.
say that because I've in the past 2 years of being in New Zealand, I've been fired 5 times. So I think we relate on a pretty deeper level of that, kind of stirring
Yes.
the pot a little bit too much. You're like, whoa, I didn't do anything, honestly.
Yes.
That's funny. Nah, man, like that's really powerful. Can you say that quote again? That mantra or manifestation, affirmation.
Yeah, sure. I am opening myself up to the universe of limitless possibilities.
That's super powerful.
Yeah.
It touches on everything. Like you can go down the I'm super, spiritual. I'm going to go down the whole universe and energy, or you can go down the whole psychology route of I'm going to have a open and growth minded. I'm going to attack things in that manner rather than being shut off and have my blinkers on and everything can only ever be one thing, right? And
Yeah.
this is where I think life is absolutely mental, because we can go so far through science, right? You go physics, like you go anything, science, and then you
Hmm.
go so far the other way, and you kind of comes round and links together, where science and philosophy, science and spirituality kind of go hand in hand, rather than like,
Yes.
like maths, for example, all the mathematicians and accountants. It's like if it doesn't add up, it's not true. I'm like, okay, in sometimes, yes, you are right. Yeah. Some things,
Yeah.
man-made things, and some non-man-made things, that is correct. But there is some things that we can't add value to, like a numerical value.
Yeah. And this idea that if we accept the notion that the prison that we live in, the only real prison we live in, is the one that we create within ourselves, then this is why this mantra is so powerful, because it challenges us to step out of ourselves. It invites, not challenges, it invites us to actually go beyond the limitations which we create ourselves. And in my yoga teacher trainings, I always, there's a whole talk I give on suffering and where is the seeds of suffering. And I ask everybody, where does suffering start? And it's just kind of like to get on the same page as everybody. Of course, I know the answer, but I want to make sure that they understand. And we all agree right from the very beginning that suffering starts in our own mind. And you can have 100 people having one experience, but all of them have a very different experience of that same, thing. The thing hasn't changed, but everybody else's perception of it. And then those perceptions, of course, solidify our own attitudes, beliefs, assumptions, and judgments about the world. So if I'm like in New York and I'm having, a bad day because something, client canceled or something, then if I have like a really, limiting view of the world, I might just call my mother and say, I'm coming home.
That world's falling apart, right?
Yeah. Or if I'm like, okay, this is just going to open up more opportunity to find more clients tomorrow, which is now my philosophy. If someone says no to you, then 10 more people are waiting to say yes.
100%. I love Steve Harvey's analogy where it's like, oh, if a door closes on you, it's not the end of the world, because just walk on down the hallway, there's more doors. And it's just so simple, right? You're just like, oh, wow, yeah, okay. I was that like closed off from the world that I thought this one opportunity was my one shot. I was like, dude, like, just keep going. Figure it out. There's like 8 billion people on the planet. I think there's going to be at least one more opportunity somewhere. And if there isn't, you're going to make it yourself,
Yes.
So then there is one.
It's funny you say that, because at my yoga retreat, when my business partner and I were starting, he's like, where are the people going to come from? And I would say to him, Adam, there's, 8 billion people on the planet. I'm sure we'll be able to find 400 of those people to come every year.
That's totally right, man. That's totally right.
We don't need to make that much effort.
Yeah. And I mean, you got the beauty of the States being pretty close, and so they can like hop over to South America pretty easily. I would assume. I've never been to either one.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Hmm.
Although that's an interesting conversation, talking about limitations. It's fascinating to me to see, specifically Americans, but I think even some Europeans as well, in a different way. But Americans are so, if they can't do something in one flight, then they just won't even look at it.
Really?
The idea of, yeah. And I think, like, to myself, like, well, number one, you're not our client, so that's okay. But number two, that is just, to me, very symbolic of sort of this limiting, how, if we want to break down the minutia of each of our own lives, how people are just constantly limiting themselves and unable to, get out of whatever box it is to experience life in a different way that could ultimately, course correct their life or change the momentum in their life in a powerful way. And we just, so many times, so many of us just say no before we've even like considered it.
Yeah, totally. That's really interesting. No, I think Europeans are the opposite. I think Europeans like to travel around and see the world a bit. Like it's a big place, but it's a small place. It's a big place because there's a lot of different like people and cultures in that one kind of area. I'm talking like the continent, and then also Scandinavia's in there, and then you've got Britain in there, and Ireland, and all these different types of people, and obviously if you look back through history, everyone's kind of moved and changed, and the borders have like been grown and broken, and countries have fucking come out of nowhere, then just disintegrated, and then there's been wars everywhere. So it's like people are kind of used to like change and moving around. I think they're a little bit more open-minded in that sort of
Yes.
sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
I would say so. The amount of people I bump into like outside of Britain that are from Britain is ridiculous. I'm like, what are you
Yes.
doing here? And they turned around and was like, well, I could ask you the same thing. I'm like, okay, yeah, touche. Good point. I was like, well, I got on the wrong
Yes.
train. I don't know about you.
Yes. Yeah. Especially you're so lucky being in New Zealand. I think that's just fantastic. But yeah, I sometimes see my life becoming more global one day in the future.
Honestly, man,
So
I think there's so many teachings we can learn from everybody, right? We like to place ourselves, especially fucking Westerners. And I don't know if it's orchestrated or if it's just kind of manifested on its own, but we like to place ourselves into this like box, right? Of like, for example, I'll use myself. I'm English. That's it.
yeah.
I'm white, English, working class. That's all I can ever be. I can only ever see the world through these sets of lenses. This is it. And you're just like, wait, hold on a minute. Like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, the world is a very big place. There's a lot of different people in it. There's a lot of different experiences. And if you actually like dig deep, I'll learn from you, and then I'll learn from a conversation I'll have with a good mate of mine who's Samoan, right? So like they're completely different areas, and you're like the very core value of what everybody's saying and how to live their life in a more meaningful way is exactly the same. We just use different words.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know that it's orchestrated. I think human beings, my kind of perception of taking in yoga philosophy, but then also kind of experiencing and watching everything that's unfolded during the last couple of years of the pandemic. What I think happens is that humans are very tribal. We need to feel, our egos are very fragile, and
you say that again.
Our egos are very fragile. And men often get chastised for having fragile egos, but the fact is that all humans have fragile egos, because our ego gives us this illusion of being alive and being connected, and that we're never going to die. And so we hold on to this kind of perfect image, and whatever that image is, and so if you're a Christian or a Buddhist or a yogi that believes in stretching, then that's all, like you need to have that to justify your existence. And it's been very much in my face, especially recently, because as I'm starting to venture down this path of teaching muscle activation and applied yoga anatomy. And one of the founding philosophies is stretching is not important. In fact, stretching hurts you. That, like the pushback that I've gotten from people, from especially in the yoga world, who, one person blatantly wrote, like, what is this malarkey? And it has been very fascinating to watch. Like, people in the yoga world are just so closed off, but it's not just people in the yoga world, it's everybody. Christians are closed off from hearing, the idea that maybe we are, there is we are energy that just comes back again and again, or, other people are closed off from something that just challenges their own sort of worldview. And so what we do as humans is that we go and find people that agree with us, and of course, social media has really exacerbated that, but we don't really get a chance to go and find people that kind of I don't know, I don't want to say challenge us, because I think like there's nothing to challenge, but just to kind of like look at life differently. And one of the philosophies in my teacher trainings, but also at Blue Osa, that I feel like we need to embrace more, just not only so that we can get along with each other, but that we can evolve as humans, is to seek first to understand. And we don't really seek out other people's different point of views and go, oh wow, that's really fascinating.
Yeah, totally. Because people get on the defensive like this, you know what I mean? Like super
Yes.
quickly. And I'm like, whoa, 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 hold on a minute. Like, we we know that, there's people in the world that are colorblind. So they're gonna see things differently,
Yes.
right?
Oh,
We
absolutely.
know that. If we sit across a table from each other and we put a vase in the middle of the table, right? And they've got, like, I'm seeing a different side of the vase than you are. We know
Yes.
that. So how am I going to expect you to say exactly what I say? It's like, no, that's not going to happen. All your experiences, your life lessons, everywhere you've gone is going to dictate your perception on things. That will
Yeah.
change your reality, right? And I think it's really beautiful opening up a conversation in a safe space to be like, right, what's your reality? What's your perception of this thing? I'm like, that's really
Hmm.
cool. And then the table will turn, right? It was like, well, this is mine, blah, blah, blah. You can take something from it, you can leave it where it is, or you can like change your reality. You can change the way you think about some things. You might, learn, maybe.
Yes.
But
Yes.
it's crazy, right? Because too many people just shoot it down. No, that's not true. Okay, that might not be true for you. Fantastic. And if it doesn't work for you, great. Hallelujah, right? But it could potentially, maybe work for someone else. So just let them do their thing. Nope, no, everybody needs to do this. You're like, oh my God, are we really arguing about this still? It's 2022, man. Come on, like we should have grown since the Romans.
Yes. I'm a huge student of Roman history. I love it. And one
Fascinating.
thing that always fascinates me is like when you look at Roman history and look at where we are now, with the exception of technology, nothing is absolutely nothing has changed at all,
Oh,
And there's just the things that people believe today are just as batshit crazy as what people believed back then.
yeah.
And the arguments that they have back then and the arguments that we have now is just, it's mind blowing. And it's, as a yoga teacher, I'm constantly reminding my yoga teacher trainings that you just have to accept where people are and, always come back to the basics, and the light of consciousness will ignite whenever it's going to ignite. And there's nothing more you can do except people just evolve in their own time, in their own way.
That's so true. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. I think people
Absolutely.
are sick of me hearing me say that, but I say it all the time. I'm like, look, guys, like at the end of the day, like it's your journey, and if it takes you
Yes.
80 years to get to the first stage, then that's great. That's your
Yeah.
journey. Obviously,
Yeah.
if you've been like shut off and keeping yourself down, then maybe that's not great. But you know what I'm saying? Like people
Yeah.
have people have a different speed, people have a different journey. Like, do your thing.
Yeah, I think it was Barbara Streisand. She was giving a concert and she basically froze on stage. And so then she went into therapy after that. And then she didn't actually perform for a long time after that. And now when she performs, she has the words of her song up there so she can never freeze again. But in an interview, the interviewer asked her, like, you've been in therapy for 25 years. Like, how come it took that long? And her response was, because it took that long.
Oh man. Yeah.
It takes as long as it takes.
Yeah. 100%. Oh, I agree with that so hard. Yeah.
Yes.
It's the pre-motion of, oh, I need to do this by this date, right? You see it all the time of by 30, I need to be married and then I need a kid, and then I need a house. And I'm like, why? Oh, because that's what you do. I was like, whoa, hold on a minute. That's like a story and kind of some people's lives, but this doesn't have to be your life. You can leave the country, you can leave the city, you can choose not to get married, you can do whatever the hell you want, like in whatever way, right? You can quit your corporate job, go to Costa Rica and make this thing called a yoga retreat and trying to get 400 plus people a year. Like, you can do whatever the fuck you want. Like, just live your life.
Yes, absolutely.
Something I really want to go back to, though, you said something at the beginning of this conversation, and I've been like kind of thinking about it for the past like half an hour or something, is physical exercise, the stretching, the physical stuff as being like an unlock to the mental stuff.
Yes.
Right. And I think that is absolutely beautiful, because I think that is exactly the point. And I do it in the gym. I do it in a more quote unquote aggressive manner, right? I like to pick weights up and drop them, right? So in the form of like in the form of weightlifting, it's like, Alex, why do you weightlift? First of all, I don't have to put the weights back down. I can drop them from above my head. And second of all, I only have to do it 6 times and not 9. It's like, and I get to sit down. That's why I like weightlifting. I do less. Anyway, that's a different story. But it's using it. I went on a little bit of a rant yesterday and kind of addressed it towards males, because I was like, I think every man has like an angry man inside of them, right? Or an angry wolf. They've got something, because they're all hurting. We're all hurting in some way or shape or form, right? And the only thing that we're told we can deal with that is aggression, which can be very, very harmful, right? So we use physical exercise to unlock that door, and then all the other stuff, the mental side, the well-being stuff, ends up pushing us through the door. And I think that's so important of what you're doing. I'd love to hear any practices, experiences, stories, whatever, of exercise being the unlock, being the key in the door, and then the wellness boom that's just blown people's minds.
There's so much to unpack there. I mean, the key to all of this is the breath, first and foremost. And so getting to breathe in a way that starts to build a steadiness, if you want to say, in the mind. And so in the Yoga Sutras, it says that the 2 causes of mind is thoughts and energy, prana and chitta. And so the death of one is the death of the other one. And so one of the ways that we, are taught, especially like in a Zen Buddhist kind of tradition, if you will, is to sit and watch your thoughts. But a lot of people can't do that. They just got too much going on. And so then Tantra yoga says, okay, well then let's start to work on energy management, if you want to call it that. That's one of the definitions of Tantra, is the science of energy management. How do we manage the energy within our body? And we can look at it at a very kind of gross level, and we can look at it at a very subtle quantum physics level. I mean, it's all interconnected. So the book, which is one of the, I guess, kind of the premier books, if you will, on yoga, is the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, which is, I think, it's one of the most fascinating, undervalued, understated books in the yoga world. Very few yoga teachers have ever picked it up, let alone read it. And in there, it just says very clearly, if you breathe a certain way, your consciousness is going to begin to move a certain way. If you do this certain pose, energy will then start to collect in your spine and move towards the bindu, which is basically the crown chakra. So we know that if we start to do movements and then start to breathe a certain way, that our energy starts to shift and our consciousness then starts to become more, I guess, singular, if you will. So there's the human mind has so many different thoughts going on at once, so many thoughts. And by doing a posture in a very clear and concise way with breath starts to shift those thoughts into one singular point, if you will. And for one brief moment, your mind is focused in one pointed, if you will. It doesn't last for long, but it does have that effect. And so when I really started getting into asana as a kid, I was one of those kids that my parents really worried about. Not because I was a bad kid, just because I wasn't good in school. And I had a really hard time focusing. Even now, to this day, I still have, hard time focusing. But back then it was really, really bad. And one of the things that I noticed very quickly was that by doing yoga, it actually helped to focus my mind. My ADD started actually becoming calm, and I was able to get a lot more done. And as I've grown through the years of my practice, I mean, some of the things that I've been able to manifest has come from that ability to really just focus my mind. And the seed of that really was because of asana, because of doing these poses, being taught how to breathe in those poses. And then in one of the kind of, I guess, last century inventions is this idea of vinyasa yoga, which, a lot of people have ideas about what vinyasa yoga is. A lot of times it's referred to as flow yoga. It's really not. That's a horrible description, inaccurate description of vinyasa yoga. It basically means to link the movement with breath. And so if you bring your hands down beside your hips, and then you bring your hands up towards the sky, like you're holding a beach ball, and then back down to your hips. If you match the inhale as you bring your hands up towards the sky, and then you exhale and bring your hands down towards your hips, but you don't allow the hands to come up until you've reached the top of your inhale, or you don't bring your hands up before you fully inhale. So you have to match the movement perfectly. And if you do, you think, oh, well, that's just so elementary, Yogi Aaron. But do it 20 times and see what happens to your mind. See what happens to your breathing. See what happens to your whole consciousness. And do it as an experiment. And start to witness, what kind of interchanges are going on. And so we know that by moving the body a certain way, we start to feel differently. If we fold forward, for example, and we do like a lot of forward bending, we start to create more of a calm effect in the body. In science, we call that a parasympathetic state. We start to go into rest and digest. And if we start to do more back bends, then we start to awaken and we energize, and we start to tap into the power of the sympathetic nervous system, which also relates to creativity and inspiration and aspiration. And then when we twist, we also start to feel, that the mind starts to go inward, but then we feel alive and nourished. So all of these kind of different ways that we move the body have an effect on our breath, have an effect on our mind, and then ultimately have an effect on consciousness. And that's, so many times when people are doing a yoga class, and in fairness, it doesn't really matter the kind of yoga class that you do. Anytime you start moving the body with conscious breath, there's going to be an awakening that can happen. And you see this happen a lot. People that go to yoga classes or some sort of movement-based, class with breath, that there's sometimes people have like this moment where they get it and their whole life just shifts. And that's, for me, is the exciting part of Tantra yoga, is to bring more of that to the masses.
That's beautiful. And I think that's, that's the entire point of physical exercise. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's going to help your physical being, your shell, your organic matter. I was like, yeah, okay. That's one of them. All right.
Yeah.
Brilliant. But we're so much more than this, and it unlocks that door, and it centers you, right? And like I've done a little bit of yoga. I did it for a bit of rehab. I seriously injured my neck when I was 15, 16, maybe, playing rugby, which completely wrecked me. Like I was walking around like the Hunchback of Notre Dame for about 4 weeks.
Oh no.
Yeah, like I couldn't move my neck at all. There was no movement, flexion, extension, rotation, nothing, nada. Like I had like a
Oof.
hole in the top of my head about 2 inches deep. Like it was a bad time. So I would go into like just a local studio and do a little bit of yoga, obviously guided. I'd go to a class, which was real cool, just beginners, that was real cool. But my experience kind of comes from just kind of self-meditating, and bringing myself back
Mhm.
into that breath. I've read a couple of books regarding breath work, and that, not too many, like literally like maybe two, maybe one, maybe an article. No, I'm joking. And it really does, man. It's so powerful. Like
Yeah.
centering things around that, bringing yourself back to the core, and it allows you to let go of those stress balloons, right? During modern life, we pick up all these balloons, and it's like Up, like the movie Up. We've got all these balloons, and it just like kind of takes us off into the sky. I was like, well, sitting down, being with yourself, sitting in your own space, and focusing on your breath, you end up letting go of some of those balloons, and you can center yourself back down, and you can be like, okay, cool. Now I know where I am. I know who I am. I know where I'm going. I know what I need to do right now, rather than, oh my God, I've got all these things that, no. Forget about that for a second. All right. It's time to turn up, but right now it's time to turn down. All right. So calm yourself, center yourself. So then you can go again. And honestly, it works. Like, and this is where I like blowing people's minds, because I'm the first one to go in the gym and start screaming at people. And, we're going absolutely mental. We're throwing things around. Okay, great. Fantastic. High fives, fist bumps, all that. But then it's like calm, collective, meditative, writing, journaling, calming down, breath work. And you're like, you have to do both. You have to be able to flick the light switch on and off. You have to be able to do both.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brother, I got 3 questions.
Okay.
All right. I said I don't have any questions,
me.
but I ask everybody the same 3 questions because I love people's answers. I've not had one that's not blown my mind and made me think about it for the rest of the day. So
Well, now you've just, increased the stress level. So
I did it on purpose. No, I'm joking. So first one, what's the greatest piece of life advice you've ever received?
If you're going to be a mess, then be a happy mess.
Wow. Holy fuck, that's gold. That's absolutely gold.
Yes.
Wow. If you're going to be a mess, be a happy mess.
Yeah, I went through this period of my life when I've had neck issues, and I had like this knife pain going down my arm. And I was in yoga class one day. My teacher, I told you I met my teacher, one of my teachers in New York. And he was this kind of big, jolly South African man. And whose father opened up a yoga studio in LA. And then he went there, and then he went to New York. And I think Alan is now almost 70 years old. But he is said in his, deep baritone South African accent. Aaron, if you're going to be a mess, then be a happy mess. He was like a very jolly man.
Wow.
And it was very potent because about 4 years later, I was in the Himalayan mountains and
Wow.
had broken my leg. I had a boulder hit my leg and broke my femur in half. And that kind of got me through it. It was like in that moment, I realized that I had a choice in how I was going to live my life in that moment. So either be a victim or be a happy mess.
That's so powerful, man. Fuck, I'm gonna quote you on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
you can use that one.
Question 2, what's the worst piece of life advice you ever received?
That's a great question. Oh Lord. I'd have to think about that. There definitely has been a few. And I don't know that I could just say like one thing. But I'm just going to say this, that there's been advices that people give to me that has been very, ego based and telling me, Aaron, you should do this and you should do that. And sometimes I've made the mistake in listening, but also with some awareness of trying it on. And it's like, okay, I know that my intuition is saying no, but they're saying yes. So maybe I need to pay attention to that or something. So let's just try it on and see how it goes. And it always, fails. And so, because, I always like to try and challenge. People always say like, they like to listen to their inner voice, but sometimes your inner voice is very muddled, and skewed by your own judgments, beliefs, and attitudes about the world. So I always try and like, it's hard for me to discern sometimes what is like the voice of spirit speaking. And I feel like I have a pretty good idea now, but on the journey getting there, sometimes I did listen to people, even though my gut was saying no. And so I have had to learn to listen to myself a lot more. But to come up with something specific, like be a happy mess, but the opposite, I can't tell you.
That's all right. I mean,
I think probably because I just let a lot of that stuff go.
Yeah.
It's like if something is useless to me,
Mm-hmm.
then I just like, okay, move on. Because I don't want to put my mind on that. I want to put my mind on other things. So yeah. Sorry.
No, that's, I think you hit the nail on the head, like it's listening to other people, even though your gut says no.
Yes.
Like you have to be able to be in tune with yourself and listening to your gut, like, the inner voice, your soul, your gut, whatever you want to call it, right? Like we all have that intrinsic feeling where it's like, this doesn't taste sweet in my mouth. It tastes a bit bitter, like, and then you're like, oh no, this person knows a little bit more. I'm like, just if you follow your gut and it doesn't work out, you're not going to be that pissed. You're going to be like, okay, well, I went with what I had and it is what it is. But if you follow your gut and it does work out, right, then you're like, wow, incredible. So it's kind of a win-win.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that, like there's been a lot of times in my life when I felt like I was stepping off of the cliff. Like one of my favorite tarot cards is the Fool, who literally is walking off the cliff and all you can see below him are clouds. So he has no idea where he's stepping into, but he's actually not looking down at the clouds. He's actually looking up and he's whistling as he's doing it. And I feel like I've been the fool a lot in my life. And, it's, looking back at it, there's been a lot of people that have really supported me in taking that giant leap. And those are the kind of people that you want to surround yourself with. But I also think that so many of us are so addicted to this idea of, success. Like you just made a comment like, well, if it doesn't work out, so what? But like it not working out is what life is about. Life is about it not working out. And we have perverted our own sort of, I think, sense of what life should be in terms of success or failure. Like so many people say to me like, oh, you're so successful. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm just living my life. And I'm experimenting with life and trying out things. And a lot of shit doesn't work. I mean, you don't see that because I don't really advertise it. Not from a place of shame, but just because it just didn't work. And so I moved on to something else. And we are so addicted to this idea of like, oh, I need to be successful and failure is bad. And it's like, actually, no, you need to, I don't even know that I would use that word failure. I just live your life, try different things. One of my expressions that I like using is my life is a living experiment. And that if we have that attitude, then we'll always be successful no matter what happens.
Yes, sir. I completely agree.
But where I was going with that is surround yourself with people who are going to support you walking off the cliff. that's where I was going with that.
Metaphorically speaking.
Metaphorically speaking, of course.
Don't take that out of context. That's not a clever idea.
No.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I agree. Totally. Last question. 3 words you'd tell your younger self.
Just do it. Just do it.
Beautiful.
Don't ask, just do it.
I like that.
And,
like that a lot.
And my younger self did. So I don't really have, I don't look back. And I know people say you should never look back on your life with regret. I don't know if I subscribe to that 100%, but I actually don't look back at anything I did with regret. I look back when I wrote my autobiography, it gave me a chance to really sort of dissect and look at my life and realize like there's nothing I could have changed per se. There's one little thing, one or two like business things I would have changed, but other than that, I've had such a full life, and part of that fullness came from that attitude of just do it.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah, shut the fuck up. Just do it.
Yes. Yes.
That's yoga 101.
Shut
the fuck up. Just do it.
This is my people. Yeah. Totally. Said it in such a poetic, spiritual way,
Yes.
I think that hits home more than, calm yourself, focus on no, shut the fuck up. Just do it.
Yeah. Yeah. More of us need to shut the fuck up.
Too much talking. Let's do it.
Yes. Too much talking.
Oh, brother.
Yes.
I really, really appreciate your time, man. And
you're welcome.
I appreciate everything that you're doing. And I actually have a good mate of mine who owns a gym out in Costa Rica.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's just a little gym. I don't actually know where it is. I coached alongside him. And I keep saying whenever the world stops shitting its pants, I'll pop over and I don't know, maybe help him out with a couple of sessions. But if I do and I somehow make it around Costa Rica, then I'll have to come do some yoga.
Please do. And I would love to take you on some hikes. Costa Rica has some beautiful hiking. And not to kind of circle back, but hiking for me is like one of the ways that I just feel completely alive and reconnects me to my indomitable willpower, being in the mountains and climbing and not rock climbing, not like cliff climbing, just with my 2 legs. But it's one of the ways that I really connect to my indomitable will. And this country is just so blessed with some amazing and beautiful hikes. So I hope that you'll come and I can take you.
Sounds perfect.
Just someplace.
Good people, good hiking, good coffee. That's all I need.
Abso-freaking-lutely.
Yeah, perfect. That sounds good. I'll let you know whenever I'm like dotting around South America. And I mean, you've got a
Absolutely.
place to come visit now in the very far bottom right hand corner of the world.
Awesome, Alex. Thank you so much for having me here.
Spot on, mate. You have a cracking day, and I'll speak to you soon.
Okay. Be well.
All right, you too. See you later.